Congratulations to all of you who have made your fantasy playoffs. Now let's get you that trophy. We react to the latest NFL news and dig into our Week 15 waiver wire ranks on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We're here for you every day, Monday through Friday, helping you get that fantasy football trophy. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. No, I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can enjoy the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, for most leagues, the majority of leagues, it's starting the playoff season, right, for fantasy football. Most leagues start in Week 15, go through Week 17, so it's time. This is when it gets real, and you lose and you're out, so we have to be accurate this week, Vinny. We got to be extra on our game. But before we get to our waiver wire rankings and start prepping for Week 15, let's talk about last night's game. It was more exciting than anyone could have imagined against two teams with a losing record. But Cooper Rush kind of did his thing. The Cowboys were still able to do whatever they wanted against this Bengals defense. The Bengals defense just stinks so bad. But Jamar Chase is just too good, and Joe Burrow is just too good.
Yeah, it seems like it's the Jamar Chase Brown show, if you want to put it all together into one deal for the Bengals. That's what it is. I mean, I know they want to keep T. Higgins around, but these two guys have gone bonkers in terms of seeing the majority of work, and now Jamar Chase is getting, rushing work. You have Chase Brown playing and receiving work. So it's like they're complete offensive weapons for this team. And it seems like every week they step into a good matchup. And Jamar Chase, typically, he saves his best games for the bigger opponents. But what's happened is every game right now is a big one for the Bengals as they try to stay alive in the playoff hunt. They get the Titans this week. They still have a shot here because they do play the Broncos in Week 17. So they're going to keep trying to win here. That's good news, right, for fantasy, that they're motivated. Jamar Chase is trying to go get his contract. He's trying to get to the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. He's doing everything to get that. The Joe Burrow playing really well. I know he had the interception, but come on, the last play there, the 40-yard touchdown to put away the Cowboys finally was something impressive. So it's these two guys mainly, a little bit of T. Higgins. I think it was a little disappointing that they didn't really have a third option get going. But if Chase and Brown can just dominate and do whatever they want, and they get the Titans this week, that possibly could happen again. I don't know if you're going to see much else that Joe Burrow is going to trust out there.
Yeah, and I think T. Higgins will be fine. He's been great. Disappeared a bit this week, but Deron Bland was on his game. The Cowboys corner against him for a lot of that game. He was playing great. He's a good corner. He just had to miss a lot of the season. But T. Higgins next week against Titans, I'm plugging him right back in with confidence. Now, Rico Dowdle, on the other hand, for the Cowboys, he looked absolutely amazing, but he couldn't get into the end zone, right? So if you needed him to put up a big day, I mean, he was so good on the ground. He could not be stopped. He looked amazing. But again, when they got near the goal line, for whatever reason, they put in Zeke. It's like Rico Dowdle would be so much better there. Now, he could be a league winner if he starts scoring the touchdowns. They get the Panthers this week and then the Bucks the week after that. Rico Dowdle's a good start. He could be a great start if he starts to get into the end zone.
Yeah, I mean, what's happened is the Cowboys have figured out how to run the ball. Now we'll see what they do in the draft. Is Dowdle giving them enough to say that he's going to be the guy? I doubt he's going to be on an island by himself. I don't know what Jerry Jones is doing with Zeke. I guess he still owes him something. I don't know. But maybe it's time for another first-round running back. So I don't know if Dowdle will hold this beyond this year, but he's trying to stay in the mix, and he's stayed in the mix through all his work on special teams. So they do like him. He's done the grunt work. He's kind of a little bit like Raheem Mostert in the way he kind of emerged for the 49ers. They needed him at some point, and he delivered. Well, Dowdle's been doing all the behind-the-scenes work. Now he's getting the glory. He gets the best matchup possible against the Panthers after a massive rushing day against the Bengals. So these are two really great matchups back-to-back. And he had been scoring before, whether it was catching passes or touchdowns. So this was kind of unusual. He was actually scoring more than having those big yardage days. So I think they'll come. I think they both come against the Panthers. I really like him this week. we'll see just how high. He's going to be ranked really high for me this week because he is a feature back at this point. I mean, forget Zeke. Okay, he's in there just for some cosmetics and to make him feel good. But really, in the end, Dowdle has been proved that he's just way more important to this offense than Zeke is, and especially with Cooper Rush in there when they've compressed the offense quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think they're going to go back to that tape and say, why are we ever putting in Zeke, especially near the goal line? Just go with Dowdle. So I agree with you. He's going to be ranked inside my top 15 for sure this week. I don't have him exact yet, but he will be up there. Now, transitioning to NFL news, because this running back, Zach Charbonnet, is going to be ranked extremely high if Kenneth Walker ends up missing another week. But yesterday we got news from Mike McDonald, the head coach of the Seahawks, saying that Kenneth Walker has to get tests done to determine the severity of his calf injury. So if he still needs to go get tests done, I feel like it's not feeling great for him, and there's a chance he could miss this week. And all 3 starts for Charbonnet this year have been really solid. The last 2 starts, 24 points, and then 34 points this last week. So Zach Charbonnet, if he gets to start again, like that's just going to be a guy that can help you win that first round of playoffs that you were expecting.
Yeah, I mean, this is why, again, handcuff properly. And I'll say one league, I have Kenneth Walker. I've had Zach Charbonnet from the get-go. So I just pivoted when Walker was on the shelf, and I've had amazing results. I mean, better than I expected, right? I thought it was
It's almost better when
it's
one
almost
of
better
them's not
because you
there,
get one back dominating all the touches. It's kind of strange when they do that, right? But it also comes down to who the number 3 is. They have Kenny McIntosh, so he's not all that reliable as a number 3. Well, Charbonnet is a very good number 2. And keep in mind, they drafted Charbonnet pretty high in relation to Walker there. So they had some plans for him like this. It had to come from a different offensive coaching staff, but they saw what he can do. I mean, he was really good at Michigan and at UCLA when he was in college. So this is kind of showing his complete skill set. So with that performance, I think they might be, hey, rest that calf a little bit, because I don't think Kenneth Walker has been fully healthy for quite some time. I think he's grinding and playing through it, maybe because he knows Charbonnet can do something like this if he's out of the lineup. So I would think they err on the side of caution against the Packers. It's a big game. They need him for the stretch run. They're in first place. I think they feel confident with Charbonnet to the point where I think they'll rest Walker this week no matter what.
Yeah, I you would think so, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, they're in prime position to get that playoff spot. Rest your guys to make sure they're fully healthy. Now, Derek Carr, on the other hand, the Saints aren't in a prime spot to get a
No.
playoff spot, and he's fractured his left hand. He could be done for the season. Who knows? I don't know why they would bring him back, honestly. But that means no more Marquez Valdez-Scantling fun, right? Like that's just going to be over without Derek Carr having that deep ball. And really nobody else is going to be of interest. But what about Alvin Kamara? Does this hurt him again? Because we saw without Derek Carr from week 6 through 8, it was mediocre fantasy performance at best. 1 really terrible game, 2 okay games because of the receptions. He was getting at least 5 receptions in all the games, but 24 receiving yards, 14 receiving yards. That last start without Carr, he did have 6 for 55 receiving yards and 67 yards on the ground. But overall, it hasn't been too great for Kamara without Carr.
Yeah, now they're playing the Commanders, so your hope is the receptions. You hope they check down. You hope the Commanders blow them out. You hope it's either Jake Haener, Spencer Rattler. I don't care who they throw in there. Just throw the ball, dump it off to Alvin Kamara. I think another player that actually could have a little value. I'm not saying go crazy, but Juwan Johnson. He did score last week. I know Carr was around in that game, but he has to be a weapon because Taysom Hill's also down. So you don't have Taysom Hill, whatever you want to call him, tight end or running back. We just don't need any Kendre Miller scoring to cut into Alvin Kamara's work. Like, he has to get all the backfield touches. He's got to get 6 to 7 targets at least, to maybe 6 catches to really get his value here. So I think he's going to be a lot more valuable going forward in half and full PPR than in standard leagues. Again, those yards are going to be harder to come by again because no one's going to respect anything the Saints do downfield now with either young quarterback. So it stinks. I mean, this has just been a weird season for the Saints. I mean, it's been layer on layer on layer of injuries here. Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, now MVS was a bright spot here, and now he loses his quarterback. So this is the second time Carr has been on the shelf. So I don't know. Just blow up the Saints season. It's terrible. But this also says play the Commanders defense this week.
Yeah, it really does. It really, really does. It's not been a fun season for them at all. We got some news about George Pickens as well. It doesn't look like he's
Mm.
very likely to play. So we will discuss if we're going to pick up any Steelers wide receivers on the waivers when we start to get into our waiver wire ranks, which we're going to do in just a moment after we take a quick break. Hey, Locked On football fans. I know you're like me, or if you're like me, I should say, and you haven't even really started your holiday shopping yet. Let's just say I'm very far from being complete. Well, if that's the case, I've got the perfect gift for you, for passionate sports fans in your life. Perhaps you heard of Ice Shaker. Ice Shaker is now officially licensed by the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and the MLB, and will make the ideal gift for anyone in your family who loves sports. It's created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers. Ice Shakers has sold over 1 million bottles, and they have changed the game with workout bottles. And this is the gift you've been looking for. Go to iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% on your offer. I have one. I got my Steelers one. It's a kitchen grade stainless steel bottle. It holds ice up to 30 hours. Insane. And what I love about this, it has the patented twist in the agitator. So it's like built-in agitator. After a workout, I love me like a protein shake, but I always have to find those stupid little balls. I can never find them in my kitchen to shake it up where it doesn't have those clumps. Well, this, I never have to worry about not being able to find it, and it's never going to have the clumps. So easy to use. And I'm saying, not really saying, I have made some cocktails in this. It could be great for a strainer as well, the agitator. And it's also just customizable, right? It doesn't have to be just a logo. You could send in your own logo. They have a custom shop, and the turnaround is very fast, 3 to 5 business days. So order your team branded bottles today, iceshaker.com, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. Ice Shakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market, iceshakers.com.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by Prize Picks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love Prize Picks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, whether it's football or basketball or any of your favorite sports that are not in season right now. Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. Here's why you need to check it out. You can now win up to 200 times your money. That's right, 200 times your money only on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. So when you make your picks and they hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. That's great for you. This week, check out all the good stuff here that's going to come in the 49ers-Ram game. I really like George Kittle, just crushing everything in this one. So go for him in this one. More on George Kittle in that game on Thursday night. It's quick, simple, and so much fun to challenge yourself and your friends to pick out who you're going with a more or less pick this week on PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, Michelle, let's get into the waiver wire. There's some injuries we're navigating through. You mentioned George Pickens, Kenneth Walker. So let's start in that backfield because there's a lot more backfields that are affected here. We also have Breece Hall on the shelf and Isaac Orendo. After his breakout game, after replacing Jordan Mason and Christian McCaffrey, he gets hurt with a foot injury, short week turnaround. What do we do here with the 49ers, Seahawks, and Jets this week?
Yeah, we don't know yet if Isaac Orendo is going to play or not. There's hope, right? But he's dealing with the sprained foot. It's supposed to be very mild. We'll see if he can go. Unfortunately, he plays on Thursday. I feel like if the game was until Sunday, he'd have a much better chance. But, they're the next man up, right? In this 49ers backfield. That's what keeps happening. So Patrick Taylor Jr., I guess technically would be next man up. Keyshawn Vaughn was active in this last game. He got 2 carries for 4 yards. And then there's Israel Abandakanda. I don't know how to say his last name. Izzy, who, remember last year in the preseason, he gave us some excitement with the Jets. He has that speed. I guess Patrick Taylor Jr., if you're picking up one, I like Kyle Shanahan does just use one back. So I guess it would go to him is what you would expect.
Yeah, Taylor did score again last week, and he did have some run here with the Packers when they needed someone to clean up in garbage time when they had clinched stuff there in Green Bay. So he does have some experience there. Abanikanda is still very inexperienced here, and Keyshawn Vaughn just had a little bit of a flash with the Buccaneers. That's about it. So these are your guys that you're picking from, and Abanikanda used to be on the Jets. It was replaced essentially by Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. We thought Allen could have a bigger role. Are you of any interest in him at all, or do we believe now that Isaiah Davis is going to be the guy? Should Hall, as expected, miss another game with a knee injury against a really good matchup against the Jaguars?
I think it'll be 50-50 again, like
Okay.
it was. I mean, they were splitting it somewhat with Breece Hall and Braylon Allen, right? But Breece Hall is a special talent, so obviously he's
Yeah.
gonna well outpace them. But in this situation, I think they showed us last week. This is what they're gonna do. They almost exact 50-50 split. Braylon Allen played 37 snaps, Isaiah Davis 36. They both got Allen got 5 targets, Davis got 6. And then Davis is just the one that got the touchdown. And it was 8 yards away, right? That could have been Braylon Allen easily if it was near the goal line. Who knows? So I'm fine with either. They definitely hurt each other. They hurt each other's ceiling. But I do think either one is a playable option this week. Obviously, you're going to prefer the Zach Charbonnet or Isaac Guerrero if he does play. But my question for you then is Patrick Taylor Jr. or go with Isaiah Davis? Which one would you do?
Yeah, based on the matchup, I think I would actually go Isaiah Davis because I could see the 49ers just throwing a little bit more and adjusting and making that adjustment. You can throw on the Rams. We know that. So I think that might be something, and you could see maybe limited rushing success because of that. It's hard to tell. I mean, it really is. I think you have to go with matchup and maybe one guy getting a touchdown. Like we did have Davis score last week, so that did help. I think the Jets offense is playing a little bit better. So I think it's close. Like, I don't know if they can overload Patrick Taylor, right? I don't see him suddenly getting 20 carries. Like, it could be like 10, maybe something like that, complementing the passing game. So it's really hard. And if that's one level of desperation, you could get even more desperate this week. You could look at Sincere McCormick. Every year there's some guy like, what? This is somebody that somebody's actually playing right now. Sincere McCormick. I get it. He's touching the ball for the Raiders, but I don't know. I don't know if I can go there or Tank Bigsby, really. I mean, Bigsby kind of made Travis Etienne managers upset. I actually liked Etienne, and then Bigsby took all his workload in that matchup and looked good. So I don't know. I think I'd probably go Bigsby over McCormick, although I would just not feel good about my chances to win my playoff game in fantasy if I had to play either one of those guys.
Yeah, hopefully you don't have to. Hopefully your team's good enough. You made it to the fantasy playoffs that you don't have to play Bigsby or McCormick. And also McCormick's not playable at all of either Zach or Zamir White or oh my goodness, Alexander Madison, I blanked his name,
Yes,
are active in that game, but they haven't been playing in a while. So I guess Tank Bigsby did get 18 carries last week. Not efficient. He doesn't get receptions, but you can get into the end zone. So Tank Bigsby is a very low end option, but a viable option if you need a body. And now moving to wide receivers, I mentioned that George Pickens is unlikely to play in week 15. So, some people might want a replacement for that. I really don't think there is one on the Steelers. Last week was the first week Pickens didn't play this season, and Russell Wilson had a season low 158 passing yards last week. Still threw 2 touchdowns, but Scotty Miller led the Steelers wide receivers with 38 receiving yards. Mike Williams, I guess, would be the guy to grab if he should have had a long touchdown immediately to start that game, but Russ and him Russ threw it too far out of bounds, and Mike Williams was wide open. It was very frustrating, but Williams only ended with 3 receptions, 36 yards. I really just think this boosts up Najee and Pat Freiermuth, right? Yeah. And Jalen Warren. Besides that, it's a tough matchup in Philadelphia. I don't really want to mess with any of the wide receivers for the Steelers.
Yeah, you look at a guy that was in Philadelphia last week, Adam Thielen. He gets the Cowboys, and you can beat the Cowboys. We know that. We saw that if you can pepper a guy with targets, the way Jamar Chase was. I mean, Thielen's not Jamar Chase, but he does get a massive amount of targets here from Bryce Young. So that would be someone you could pick up. You can look at either Charger here based on what the status of Vlad McConkey is. It is a very good matchup. It doesn't get much better against the Buccaneers. So you have Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer's option. We did also mention Ray McLeod. They are playing the Raiders, so that's a very favorable matchup this week. The Raiders are actually a little trickier inside, so maybe it's not as easy for Darnell Mooney to stretch the field, but maybe McLeod and Drake London do a little bit more this week. So those are some options, but you're right. It kind of stinks that there's no Steeler you can pivot to. I know Van Jefferson was the guy who scored, but Calvin Austin is on the team too. So it could be very committee-like. And again, you're just trying to maybe fill one hole, and maybe you look at some of the people coming back from buys here, right? Devon Vele, someone like that, it could be available. Maybe you take a shot on one of the Commanders receivers, right, away from Terry McLaurin. So those are some other options you could go with based on the matchup. So just try your best with those matchups, I think, this week.
Yeah, I think the best pivot would go to one of the Chargers wide receivers if Ladd McConkey misses again. Obviously, if Ladd McConkey would have an amazing matchup if he plays this week, but if he misses, now then Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer have a great matchup against the Buccaneers. And I honestly, it's the best one for Josh Palmer. Palmer was on the field for the most snaps among the Chargers wide receivers last week, had 6 receptions, 78 yards, and 9 targets. But Palmer ran 23 of his routes out of the slot, most on the team by far. And the Buccaneers have allowed the most receiving yards out of the slot among all teams this season. So great matchup for either Ladd McConkey in the slot if he comes back, or Josh Palmer, who then plays his role if he doesn't. So Josh Palmer would be my number one pickup and play this week. And then obviously Adam Thielen has been doing well as well. If he's out there, you can pick him up. But I feel like anytime we start to believe in him, he kind of falls on his face.
Yeah, I think clearly he's the best Panther you could have. I mean, we've talked about Xavier Legette, but he just has trouble catching passes that are clutch to try to win games. So you can't really go in that situation. And so hopefully you'll find some help there. Not a lot out there, and a lot of people are managed, but it is not a bye week. No more bye weeks, so you should be okay, hopefully, in a lot of situations. And we'll look. If you're playing a streaming game, however, at quarterback or tight end or defense, we'll have some answers for you there coming up in our final segment. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It is America's #1 sportsbook because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. And when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. That's some good action coming in on Thursday right away. We actually have a couple good primetime games coming up involving NFC West teams. We got the Rams and 49ers. We have the Seahawks and the Packers coming up. So some really good primetime action as well as just a loaded full slate of games. So check it out there. Just visit FanDuel.com. To join today for Week 15, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Again, first $5 bet will get you $150 in bonus bets only at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Michelle, let's get into some streaming quarterbacks. Tua Tagovailoa was a guy that he was sitting on that one touchdown pass throughout the game, and then he exploded in overtime with Jonnu Smith. It gets the 2, comes through with a pretty good fantasy day against the Jets, and you like him again against the Texans this week.
Yeah, I mean, the last 4 weeks, he's been quarterback 10, 3, 8, and 8. He's starting to get that connection again with Tyreek Hill. He's starting to use Jalen Waddle. He has his 3rd target in Jonnu Smith. This Dolphins offense should just be better overall, but they're starting to come along slowly. And it's the Texans. They have also been struggling too on offense, but after the bye, hopefully they get back on track. Like you would expect both of these teams to be able to put up points. Tua's going to have to be able to keep up with them, hopefully. And the Texans can be thrown on. So I think if Tua's still out there, he's one of the safer options. It's not like he's going to have like a 40-point upside, but he's safe to score at least 17 to 20 points, I think, this week.
Yeah, I do like him quite a bit. I mean, he's going to have to throw again. That Texans run defense is legit, but their secondary stinks, and all his key receivers are getting going at the same time. So I like that. Another guy I like this week is Aaron Rodgers. I hate to say it, but
I hate him this week.
I know I hate recommending this, but it is against the Jaguars. I know the Jaguars defense kind of played over its head last week and stopped Will Levis.
The last 2 weeks.
Yeah, the last 2 weeks, maybe they're figuring out something, but Aaron Rodgers, I think, also figured out something. He was in a tough matchup last week. He just figured out, hey, I know how to throw the ball. We get it to Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams as much as possible. So maybe that kind of was prompted by, again, no Breece Hall in the backfield. That looks like the case again. So I do like that. I mean, you could look at Anthony Richardson and hope he compiles enough against the Broncos. Now, there is another way you could go, and it's not for just people totally looking at the kind of game log, but it is Kirk Cousins. You
Oof.
could look there. They're playing the Raiders. So if Kirk Cousins can't come through, and he's actually been better in primetime games. So this is in Las Vegas. He could actually be okay in this game because the Raiders secondary stinks. We saw even Baker Mayfield had a messy interception game, and he still found a way to put up numbers last week. So if people are dropping Kirk Cousins and people are writing him off, he's still starting. It's still a decent matchup. He has decent weapons. I would maybe go in that direction this week because I think the Falcons should have a lot of success in that game offensively.
Yeah, I would much rather go with a guy like Anthony Richardson, who is at least like if you're going to take the risk, right? Richardson has scored at least 21 points in 2 of the last 3 weeks. I know it's against the Broncos, but the Broncos have also faced many bad quarterbacks this year. If you look at the list, and then they just got torn up by Jameis Winston. Now they got 3 interceptions against him, but they also allowed 500 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Yep.
And Winston has a huge game, over 30 points, 30 fantasy points in that game. Richardson's very similar in the way he'll probably throw 3 interceptions, but he's willing to chuck it up, right? So as long as Josh Downs plays, I do think Anthony Richardson's an okay option with high upside as well. And then again, over Kirk Cousins, I'd rather go with Will Levis against the Bengals. I like that matchup a little bit more. And Will Levis and Kirk Cousins both stink right now. So you might as well go with the guy in I think, the better matchup overall.
Yeah, that's fair. And Richardson has the cheat code, and you also have that in playing and coming into play over some other guys, right? That always helps when you're looking at fantasy. So now at tight end, look, there's not a lot out there because all the bye weeks are done here. So you're taking a shot on some guys. I think the first 2 guys you have to look at, Michelle, are Pat Freiermuth and Zach Ertz, right? I mean, Ertz is coming back after a bye, so he might be either Freiermuth might have been undervalued for the last 2 weeks until he's come on strong here. So I think that's where you go. Then you're just gonna have to just find starting guys who have made some catches this year or beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, Pat Freiermuth is a good start this week without George Pickens there. He's going to be needed. He's caught a touchdown each of the last 2 weeks. Zach Ertz has caught a touchdown each of the last 3 weeks and is getting the targets. It's not like these guys have high ceilings, but they're good plays. Hunter Henry has had 9, 8, and 9 targets over the last 3 games, had 7 receptions for 75 yards the last game. So if he's out there, he's a good play. And then if you're like super, super desperate and you just need to find someone out there, I mean, Chig Okonkwo hasn't been doing. I mean, he caught that long touchdown a couple weeks ago, but he gets a great matchup against the Bengals. And then Michael Mayer, if you want to chase his production from last week, with Desmond Ridder. Ridder did target him 5 times in last week's game. So those would be your desperation options.
Yeah, and that's where you have to look at now. And hopefully you found a decent tight end, but I think people going through it here are people that have Dalton Kincaid or
Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, those are the
Evan
2.
Ingram.
And I have both of them, and I'm in the playoffs with both of them. So kudos. So there's a different way to go there if you need some options this week, certainly. And now looking at the defenses, there's one that's probably going to be out there a lot because they've stunk. Is the Bengals. They're getting the Titans. That's the best matchup all season long. And some people might have just said, okay, they're not going to do anything, but they do have Trey Hendrickson, and he can get some sacks and get them some plays here. And then the Ravens, they had a bye week. They've kind of faced some really tough teams, right? The Eagles and Steelers, so they might be dumped. They haven't done a lot, but they can make some adjustments, and they're 14.5-point favorites there in New York against the Giants.
Yeah, I love those 2. If those 2 are out there, you got to go for it. Who would you rather go with? The better matchup against the Titans, but you're playing the Bengals, who literally couldn't stop Cooper Rush or Rico Dowdle. And I know, Rico Dowdle's been an exciting player, but still, come on, they could not stop them at all. Would you rather go with that risk, but in a great matchup, or the Ravens, who haven't been a dominant defense either this year, but and a little worse matchup against the Giants, but still a good one?
Yeah, I think I would go Ravens. Here's why. I think I just trust them coming off a bye that they'll make some adjustments. Also, they'll just find a way. They'll find a way to make some plays in, and they're just bigger favorites, right? I mean, it's barely a touchdown edge here. I think it's around 5 points for the Bengals in Tennessee, so that could be a little bit closer. So the Bengals, to me, like that's the defense you pick up if you're in a deep league and everyone's got somebody and you need to just get someone, they're available. The Ravens are probably managing a lot of leagues, but again, they could have been dumped also with the bye. Commanders, also a team that I would look at now with the Saints quarterback situation. They were on a bye as well. So keep that in mind. Some of those teams could be available. And if you really need someone, the way Kyler Murray is playing, maybe look at the Patriots as well in that game against the Cardinals this week. So again, there's always a streaming option, and don't fret it. There's someone to play. It is kind of tough because the Eagles and Steelers are playing each other. So some of those traditional defenses may not have as high as upside this week.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. That's it for today's episode. We will be back tomorrow starting our positional ranking, starting with the running backs and quarterbacks, and then getting into wide receiver and tight ends on Thursday's show. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Give us a like on whatever podcast app you're listening to. And we will talk to you tomorrow. Have a great night. Bye, y'all.